Between Us, The Ultimate Rescue, directed by Barry Avrich.
That was the voice of Cameron Bailey. He's head of the Toronto International Film Festival, speaking from the stage at Toronto's Roy Thomson Hall, just before the lights were dimmed at the start of the only festival screening for Canadian director Barry Avrich's October 7th documentary, The Road Between Us. Bailey took the opportunity to publicly apologize to the Jewish community, although he'd already apologized in writing last month, for treating this film as too hot to handle and pulling it from the TIFF lineup, only to reinstate it after an intense 48 hours, accompanied by an international firestorm of outrage over censorship, especially after some of the reasons were made public why TIFF officials had banned the film, including internal film festival staff opposition to Israel's treatment of Palestinians. And also, apparently, the filmmakers hadn't properly dealt with copyright concerns when they included Hamas's own graphic and gory videos that had been live-streamed on the day. Meanwhile, the third concern was that showing the film could cause safety problems for the festival due to expected large anti-Israel protests. Both Avrich and his partners were on hand for the premiere, and they walked the red carpet alongside the protagonists of the documentary, retired IDF Major General Noam Tibon, who's a counter-terrorism expert, and his wife Gali Tibon, who's a Holocaust scholar. The couple was on the beach in Tel Aviv on October 7th when the invasion started. Their son Amir, who's a journalist with the Haaretz newspaper and has since written a book about this story, texted his father from their home on kibbutz Nahal Oz. It's the closest community to the Gaza border. Amir and his wife and their 2 young daughters were trapped inside their safe room while the attack was happening. General Tibon went into commando mode, armed mostly with his 35 years of military training and a single pistol. The couple raced south in their car, driving into the war zone, a distance of some 90 kilometers, all the while encountering terrorists, dead bodies, wounded survivors, and discovering to their shock that the Israeli army was in disarray.
Some areas in Israel that emergency services can make it. Ambulances can make it. The IDF can't make it there.
I realized nobody's going to come. So I called my father.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, September the 12th, 2025. Welcome to North Star, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. The documentary reenacts the timeline of what happened during those 10 harrowing hours, and we see how the Tibons saved not only their own flesh and blood, but up to 400 people, including marshalling a desperate ragtag defense squad at their son's kibbutz. The documentary depicts the Nahal Oz attack. This kibbutz had about 470 residents. An IDF base of the same name next door bore the brunt of the initial terrorist assault, and it's been described as the worst failure of the IDF on that day. 53 soldiers were killed, including female intelligence officers. 10 were kidnapped into Gaza. But at the kibbutz, thanks to General Tibon and the kibbutz's embattled security squad who were able to fight back, some 80 terrorists were killed, and the death toll among the Israeli residents was much smaller than in other communities. 15 civilians died, 8 were taken hostage. The film's director insists his is not a political film, just a story of family and heroism. But as our CJN news editor Lila Sarek discovered when she attended this week's screening as one of the nearly 2,000 ticket holders, it was impossible to keep politics out of it. Lila Sarek joins me now to describe the day and review the film. Thanks for joining us.
A pleasure. Thanks, Helen.
Was it full when you went? Was it sold out?
It was full. So when I got there, the Toronto Police Force had closed off the street, and they had pro-Palestinian protesters on one side and the people lining up for the film and the pro-Israel protesters on the other.
Is there anything that justifies genocide?
There was barricades between
Yes,
them,
there
or
were-
they just stood there?
There were you could walk around them, but they had fencing up, and it was quite clear that when when one side went to the other side to engage, the police were pretty scrupulous about keeping everyone separate. The protest was surprisingly small, definitely under 50 people. And I was really anticipating a really huge protest. There was a lot of international media there, a lot of folks with press badges, and I thought a big statement was going to be made. And it wasn't. By the time the film ended and I came out, the protesters were gone.
Okay, well, that's interesting because Mark Selby, one of the people in the production team, the partner of Barry Avrich in producing this film, told the audience, "Thank you for taking a chance to be here today." I was wondering if that was because it was going to be dangerous to come in, or they were, like you said, fearful that it would have been a lot bigger.
There was a lot of security to get in. So first you had to show you had a ticket. And then you had your bag inspected. You walked through a metal detector and you were patted down by security guards. So this was like going to an airplane, not like a movie theater. So the onus was really on them to make sure it ran very smoothly. And it did.
Would you say the audience was made up of mainly Jewish people from the community and also, as you said, media? Or could you tell?
It did look like it was largely Jewish people and media.
And allies, I think. There were some politicians who were not Jewish, but were allies, I saw.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Now, there was sort of like a pre-introduction by some speeches and some of the TIFF people and then the producers. What was Cameron Bailey saying at the beginning? He's the executive director of TIFF, to try to extend an olive branch, mea culpa, to the Jewish community.
A story of a family under threat on a horrific day. And I want to apologize, especially to the Jewish community, for mistakes I made in the lead up to this day. In an environment of rising, dangerous anti-Semitism, I want to apologize for the bird we caused.
And there was lots of applause for that. The film got a standing ovation before it even screened. And at the end, it was a very long, prolonged standing ovation.
Before we talk about what the film looked like, just quickly, Cameron Bailey apologized in August, and he apologized yesterday. What is interesting is he said that he apologized for the mistakes he made in the lead up to today, to the film being shown. Was there any feeling that or did you hear anyone ask, or say that he needs to be fired, that this was such a cardinal sin that it's not just going to go away because they had one screening? Was there any lingering bad feelings about this that you heard from people when you interviewed them?
Definitely. People are, they were very relieved that the film was there and that they were able to see this at TIFF and that the decision had been reversed. But there was certainly, I think, some lingering bitterness that it was turned down in the first place and that there was such a controversy about this film and the way it had been handled. There was a lady outside I saw who had a sign that said Cameron Bailey should be fired.
It's important that it be seen, and the way that that Cameron Bailey handled the showing of the movie and then the removal of it and then the restoring of it was just atrocious. I think it shows that he was transparently lying about the reasons for withdrawing it, and really I think it's incumbent on TIFF to get rid of someone like that who's that incompetent.
Can I get your name?
Richard Klagsbrun.
So there certainly was that amongst the theater goers. And I think it really prompted, if you hadn't heard about the movie before, you certainly heard about it afterwards. So I think a lot of people said they weren't regular TIFF goers, but they came because they really wanted to support this movie that had such a difficult time getting into the theater.
People have a right to take in art forms that they choose, and that's really what this festival is all about. And I think, writ large, this demonstrates the resilience of the Israeli people and the Jewish people.
Can I get your name?
Zahavi Zeinberg.
Right. And I mean, what did Barry Avrich say? Can you tell us a little bit about his opening remarks before the film played about how this journey has been for him and his people and how he got support to continue on, to soldier on? Do you remember what he said?
he and his co-producer were very gracious about the whole issue, and they did say it was a difficult road, and they thanked the community who had their back. And when we had seen the film first, Disinvited, there was a huge wave of outrage from the Jewish community, from the Jewish arts community. Some of the board members were upset. The TIFF Lightbox stands on land that was donated by the Reitman family. Ivan Reitman was a filmmaker, and that family were Holocaust survivors. They came from Hungary. They had a car wash, and they were very graciously donated the land to TIFF Lightbox. So it's a film festival with deep Jewish roots.
My family, Max and Sloan, every mile, as you said, your only option is have the courage of the heroes that are in this film. So thank you to them.
But he did extend, from what I hear, an olive branch back to Cameron Bailey. So it seems like it's all kumbaya now. All right, so the lights go down. You're watching this film.
It is so close to Gaza. But they told us even a butterfly cannot pass this fence without us knowing it. And we all believed it.
You and I have talked before about not wanting to screen the actual Hamas footage back in 2023. How was it to now finally see this 2 years later?
So the film really intercuts between a number of people from that day talking in the present, and then it cuts back to the film that was live streamed by Hamas. There were security cameras on the kibbutz. There was cameras, rogue cameras on the highways.
It is an apocalyptic scene as you're driving here through the south.
It's graphic and it's gory footage. And I hadn't looked at it in about 2 years. And so I was kind of shocked because I'd forgotten how truly graphic and truly awful it was. It's hard to believe that one would forget this, but you do forget. Barry Avrich made a point of saying that this is really graphic and gory footage, but they wanted to show exactly what Noam Tibon and his wife Gali had seen that day. And so they don't use random footage. They really went and looked for the exact footage of the exact spots that they would have been driving by to show what they would have seen on that day, so that it doesn't feel gratuitous, but it's definitely difficult viewing. Like it was a very violent day. So I think that's challenging for viewers. And I think there were definitely people in the audience who had not seen it before.
How did you know? Were they crying or gasping? Or
It was silent. This is a 95-minute film. You did not hear a peep. It was gripping, and you just don't hear a peep in the audience.
Did anybody leave because it was too hard?
I didn't see anyone leave. I was way up in the top. I did not see, and I was so focused on the film because it's really a very involving story. You know how it ends, but it's still a very suspenseful story of Noam, and there were lots of details that I didn't know.
Retired General Noam Tibon.
Noam Tibon is a big deal retired Major General.
The former commander of the Northern Formation for the Israel Defense Forces.
In a way, I need to trust the IDF that they will do their job. I was there for 35 years. But this is an instinct of a father. Something in my gut feeling told me, no, go, go, go. And basically, from that on, I'm on a mission to save my family. As simple as this.
So Noam Tibon and his wife, Gali, who's a teacher and a author. So they set out from Tel Aviv early that morning after they get the text from their son that the Hamas terrorists have infiltrated the kibbutz. And along the way, they meet this couple who are fleeing from the Nova Festival. And so they pick them up in their car and they make a U-turn and they go back to Ashkelon.
What did they do with that couple? Just to give them to rescue or safety? Or
Yeah, just they rescue them. At that point, they're now into the Hamas-controlled zone, and they see these people lying. These people are lying in a ditch, and they see the Tibon's car drive by, and they jump out of this ditch, and they say, "Save us!" And so the Tibon couple take them in their car, and they take them back to Ashkelon, which is kind of the border of where things are safe. At the end, Noam Tibon is just about to enter the gates of the kibbutz where he knows his son is with his family. He's got a son is there with his wife and two very little girls. And he sees a soldier has a very serious injury. And he has to make a decision. Is he going to save this soldier or is he going to enter the kibbutz? And he saves the soldier. He picks the soldier up, puts him in the car. They drive back to a bomb shelter where his wife was.
The soldier's wife.
No, sorry, where Tibon's wife is. So Noam Tibon had dropped his wife at this bomb shelter, still in a Hamas-controlled zone where all these Noah Festival people had been sheltering and murdered.
Is that the one where Hirsch was? Hirsch Pauline?
No.
Why did he do that? Why did he put her there? Because he thought it was safer? I don't understand why.
He knows he's going into a battle, right? He's going onto kibbutz where there still are terrorists walking around shooting people. So he leaves her there and says, I'll come back for you. And so he does. He comes back for her with this wounded soldier. And in the meantime, another old friend of his, another old retired, very senior army person, is on the way down, and they all meet up at this bomb shelter.
What kind of weapons did they have with them?
So Noam starts off with a pistol, like this little tiny pistol gun. And his wife, Gali, is driving because she says, well, because I need you to use the pistol. And
yeah, he's riding shotgun, literally.
He's literally riding shotgun. And he's also on his phone and he's texting all of his old army friends because he's a very senior person in the military. So he's trying to work his contacts and say, hey, my son's under fire in this kibbutz, send army troops to this kibbutz. And he doesn't get any answer. So he's on the phone and she's like speeding, 150 kilometers down these deserted highways. Toward the end, he has this terrible decision to make. Does he rescue this soldier who will die if he doesn't rescue him? He has a serious injury. Or does he enter the kibbutz where he knows his son is under fire with his little girls? And he picks the soldier up, takes them back to the bomb shelter. His wife, Gali, takes the car farther on where they meet up with an ambulance. And the soldier's life is saved. And Noam Tibon turns around with an old army friend and they go back and they finally enter the kibbutz.
Okay, so they split up. She takes the car and then he jumps into someone else's car.
Exactly.
Wow. She's brave too, a story. We didn't hear about her story.
They're high school sweethearts. They met when they were 15 and they keep saying, we're on a mission. And they just follow each other blindly. At one point, he comes across an ambush, and sadly, some of the soldiers have been killed in this ambush. And he takes someone's gun and someone's helmet and continues on his mission to save his family.
Once we told the girls Saba was on his way, it was also something we told to ourselves. We knew he would get over anything it takes to get to us.
And at the end, he says, one of the things I am most proud of is all during my mission, I didn't leave anyone behind. So he goes and he rescues the Nova people and he rescues the soldier. And in the end, I don't think it's a spoiler, he does get to his son and rescues his son and his family. And he knocks on their door and says, open the door. Grandpa is here. At which point, yes, everyone kind of I felt a bit of a tear welling up.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your friend and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
There was, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Did he have to encounter any terrorists and shoot anybody himself?
Yes, he definitely is armed and there is lots of firing of guns around. So he gets into the kibbutz, and at this point, a couple of different army units have arrived. But what he said, which is something I hadn't known, at other kibbutzim, he says that the army waited outside the gates. That was one of the reasons why we see such a terrible loss of life. He's at the gates of Nahalaz, which also suffered a terrible loss of life because the army was outside the gates and didn't enter. So he gets to the gates and he knows, he says, there's a side gate. The main gate is locked and they were afraid it was booby-trapped. So he says, but I know there's a side gate. So they go to the back gate and he says, Kadima, let's go on in. And they do, and they follow him. And he's like this grandfather. He is a grandfather, as we know, but he's like saying, okay, you guys take the north side of the kibbutz and this team will take the south side with me. And they go house by house, making sure there's no terrorists in the house and telling the people in the safe rooms, come out for a minute, go to the washroom, get a drink of water, and go back in your safe room until we know it's really safe.
Incredible. So it's almost like, I know this is going to sound weird, but it's almost like a Liam Neeson movie, you know, where he goes and Taken and all, he goes and uses his special set of skills. He's long retired, and I can't compare it, of course. But I mean, you're rooting for them. If you're not involved in this movie and you're not someone who cares about the Israel-Hamas war, is it still entertaining? You said it was riveting, even though you know the ending, right?
It is. So Barry Avrich has been very careful to frame this. He says this is not a political movie. This is a movie about what a mother and a father would do on the day they get this terrible text from their kid. The movie, towards the end, does talk about there are hostages. We see him in town square, and there we see, you can't help but notice there are pictures of hostages. It doesn't really touch on the war. It mentions that there is still a 2-year ongoing war, that Nahalaz, the only people who'll be able to come back to it really are old people. Young families cannot or choose not to live there for clear reasons. So Barry is very clear to frame this as a story about a family and not as a political story.
At the end of the movie, there was a Q&A, and I'm sure politics did come up. The journalists who interviewed them did bring politics up.
So toward the end of the movie, I believe it's Gali mentions that Israel was humiliated on October 7th, and that what's happened since has had an element of revenge to it. And so Lisa LaFlamme, who was the very experienced journalist who was interviewing the couple and the filmmakers at the end of the movie, talks about this.
That day, Israel's response has an aspect of revenge because of the humiliation of that day. So on October 7th, there was certainly an absence of force. And now there is an overwhelming use of force, as we know, with over 64,000 estimated Palestinian deaths. So bring us if you can, Gali, back around. If you can answer, let Gali answer. Let Gali answer. Excuse me, I'd like to ask Gali if you can bring us back around the Tibon family table since that day, and how what has followed. You call for change in the film. What would you like to see happen?
There is controversy over the number of deaths, which because they are coming from a Hamas-run health ministry, and also none of these numbers have differentiated between combatants and civilians. And Gali speaks, and you can really hear the sorrow in her voice.
I can speak only for myself, if that's okay. The war on Gaza should have stopped a long time ago, and could have stopped a long time ago. It would do good to everybody in the region, but especially to Israel. We could have our hostages back a long time ago. We could have, if you want to lecture, that's different. I can only answer in short and say many lives could have been saved, and I think I hope it's not too late, and we can still end the war
bring the hostages back, and bring peace upon the region.
And her husband goes on to say, we need a strong military, and we also need a strong democracy. He says this is Israel's greatest failure in the whole state of Israel. October 7th was the greatest failure in the state of Israel. And he calls for a formal investigation, which has not yet occurred, although there have been many calls for that. And he says, and we need an investigation of the military, of the security, of the intelligence services, and of Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
So if they're no hawks, they're more on the progressive side.
Yeah,
they're survivors themselves.
They're secular people who live in Tel Aviv, and they're staunch Zionists. I mean, they're kind of like the old pioneer Halutzim, let's get it done spirit. And yet, when Gali answers, her voice is so filled with sorrow for what has happened over the ensuing 2 years, and of course the fact that there are 48 hostages still in Israel, still in Gaza, about 20 of whom are still believed to be alive, which is heartbreaking for everybody.
What, if anything, changed in your mind, or you came away from this differently?
I think the thing that really struck me, besides Noam and Gali's tremendous courage, it's just, they start off looking like regular folks, and they're tremendous courage. What really struck me was the fact that how several times in the movie they kept saying, we're so alone, and how the state absolutely abandoned its people on that day. You see them driving down the road as they're listening to the radio, and everyone's kind of learning in real time, as we did here in North America, the extent of this attack. At first they think it's just an attack on their son's kibbutz, and then they realize, of course, that the whole region has been overtaken by Hamas. And they're driving down the road and it's empty, and they said, we thought we would see army on the road. Like, they stop and rescue these poor folks from the Nova Festival, but there's no army out there. There's an interview with the wife of the man who is running the security on the kibbutz, and she says, I looked in his notes, and they used to do these drills of how to protect the kibbutz in case of an invasion. And they had anticipated the IDF would be there in 10 minutes. I think it's actually 8 minutes. Like, that was what their drills were predicated on. Of course, that doesn't happen. It's hours, and there's this little ticking time clock throughout the movie that tells you how much time has elapsed as they're driving south. And at one point, the Tibons encounter an army patrol, and they say, please go to this kibbutz and save our son. And the senior officer there says, I can't do it. I have to talk to my commander. And Noam Tibon says, the chain of command is gone. There is no chain of command today. And we do know that the military suffered also terrible losses. And yet, what struck me was how alone they felt all in this quest, and how devastating it is for them to just feel like it's just the two of us on this mission.
Thanks so much, Lila. I wish I was there with you. Thanks for being on the CJN's North Star.
Thank you.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. The film will be shown in selected Cineplex theaters in major North American cities, including Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, beginning October 3rd. Toronto police did make one arrest at the screening. It was an anti-Israel protester. We reached out to ask them if any charges are pending, but we didn't hear back by our deadline time, so stay tuned. North Star is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany. Michael Freeman is our executive producer. The theme is by Brett Higgins. Thanks for listening.